All right. Hi, everybody. This is Yelena Subasic with Massey Consulting. Thanks for joining us today for our June Cloudbytes. Jim Stubanas, our Sage Intacct Consultant here at Massey, is going to be presenting today on project dimensions versus project accounting inside Sage Intacct. And this is being recorded and will be out there in our Sage Intacct newsletter and out on YouTube for you to access if you need to. So, Jim, if you want to go ahead and begin, it's 2:01, so if people trickle in, that's fine, but you can go ahead and get started.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so my name is Jim Stubanas. I have been with Massey Consulting for 7 years. I'm one of the senior consultants as well as project manager. And today I'm going to speak on the topic of project dimension versus project accounting. The distinction is that you have the ability to use the project dimension in Intacct without having to enable the entire project module. And we're going to talk about why this might be a useful application for you. I'm also going to toggle back and forth between two different companies. One of them is going to have the project enabled, and the other one is going to have the entire project module enabled. So I'm going to flip through there. So let's take a look at why we would want to use the project module. Okay, when do we only want to use the project dimension versus the whole project module accounting? If you are using the core Intacct accounting and you decide that you have to have one more dimension, maybe something you're just short one dimension and you don't do project accounting, but you need some way to get an additional reporting unit in your system, then you can subscribe to the project dimension. There is a cost. It's $3,500 a year. But if you contrast that against buying additional dimensions from Intacct, which are only sold in bundles of 3, even if you only need 1, that cost is $9,000 a year. So it's much more affordable. It's already built into the system where the user-defined dimensions have got some caveats to how they are presented in the reports and what they look like. It's a very inexpensive alternative to user-defined dimensions. Some things you want to keep in mind is that you don't have a need for billable timesheets or expense reports. That's what you would use the project module for. And you don't have a need to track revenue or expenses against projects. It is essentially another dimension in your account stream that you can use for reporting. It acts as a tag. That's what some people like to call the Intacct dimensions. You can rename it, and I'm going to show you how you can do that. And then you can repurpose it for project accounting if that's not being used. So let's go over and let's just take a look at that in just a minute. When you enable it, you'll find that the only place that you can access this project dimension is in the customer in accounts receivable. Now, these slides are going to show you the Intacct environment on the old UI. But in my demonstration, because Intacct wants us to use the latest and greatest, and many of our users have already switched over to the new UI, I'm going to demonstrate in that mode as well. I'm going to just toggle over, and let's go take a look at one of our Intacct companies. All right, 1 second. And I'm going to log into these two companies so we can demonstrate that. I thought I had them open already, but somehow my screen went blank. So let's just stop for 1 second and get signed in here.
And while you're doing that, Jim, I'm just going to go ahead and let everybody know if you do have any questions, during the presentation, don't hesitate to put them in that chat box on the side of your screen, the GoToWebinar, and we can address those either in the presentation or towards the end. But don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch to that project-only company, and let's go take a look at where you would access that. So this is the new UI, or the Action UI. We get to our applications through the left-hand side pane, and here in the accounts receivable, we'll see that under this UI, it's found under projects. And when you edit one of those projects or go to create a new project, what you're going to find is, compared to the full project module, we basically have an abbreviated screen. We just have two screens, the main project screen and the additional info. Once you've created these project entries, you will then also see them available in cash management, accounts receivable, accounts payable data entry screens, your general ledger, also time and entry. And we will take a look at that later on in the presentation. So let's go back and take a look at this. So that's what that screen is going to look like once you're inside of it. The menu access is a little different under the UI. You'll also have information on here that you can fill out, and using the custom report writer, gather information about that project dimension as well. One of the things that you have the ability to do is to designate a project type, as well as to set project status. And you will have the ability to then record transactions, whether they're in time entry, accounts payable, accounts receivable, sales order, cash management, against that project dimension, and ultimately report that up to the general ledger. So without even using the full project module, or if you are using an external project system and want your information reportable to the general ledger, you can do that with just the project dimension. In the GL, for instance, when we go to do the reporting, we will see that the project dimension is enabled, and we will be able then to roll them into the financial statements. So for instance, if I was using the project dimension and maybe I'm an audit firm, I could rename it audits, and I could run a P&L based on each of the individual audits that I'm presenting or I'm engaged in. We also have the ability to support parent-child relationships. So if we had, for instance, we were doing an audit for General Motors, but within that audit, we broke that down into sub-projects, maybe based on divisions, Saturn, Buick, Cadillac. We can also support the child reporting, parent-child reporting. Now, how do we get this activated? Really very easy. For any of you that have ever worked on the Intacct environment, the first thing that you would do is you always start at your general ledger. I'm going to go to general ledger, and here I'm going to move to setup. Once I get there, I click on configuration, and in the general ledger configuration screen, for all dimensions, they don't become active until we activate them, starting with the general ledger. So here you can see I've checked the project dimension right here. It says it's enabled. And then I would follow suit with, for instance, my accounts payable configuration. If we scroll down, we'll see that now that project dimension is available right there in AR. The AP screen is virtually identical, or here we are, we're in the AP. Then if we want to also record it in cash management, time and expense, purchasing, these would then be available for data entry in each of the modules. So very easy to activate. If you go to use it in a module and you don't see the dimension available in data entry, it simply means you haven't activated that checkbox in one of your modules. There we go. Now, let's talk about what full project module accounting does. If we're using the project module, then we're talking about a robust project reporting system, not just the dimension where you're capturing information to report up to the general ledger. We're talking about the ability to record timesheets against a project and a task. We're able to generate billings, whether they be fixed fee, time and material. We can capture AP bills and pass them through the project management system. We can capture labor costing. You're able to set wage rates for hourly employees, salary employees, and through time entry, designate the project and the task that you're going to charge these against. So there's a lot more robust reporting that we're doing here. For the timesheet and expense reporting, using the time and expense module in conjunction with projects, we have the ability to record employee time along with approvals, as well as expenses coming into the time and expense module and use those approvals. One last thing that we can do is we can, for instance, capture statistical information. We call them statistical accounts that, for instance, would record hours utilized on a project versus unutilized hours, maybe for management functions, downtime, vacation. One thing to keep in mind is if you're going to use the project module, you'll also have to set up and use the sales order entry module. And the reason is all the billing that's done for projects is actually passed through the order entry module. So you want to activate that. You want to turn on your project dimension in the setup. And you're going to have to create some item codes in there for the purpose of billing. Now, if we flip over and take a look at one of our other companies, then we'll see a much more robust project environment. So I'm going to switch over and give you a little look-see on that. This company has been set up to be a full project environment. When we go into the application, the first thing that we would have to do to make this usable is we'd have to go into the company, and then we go into administration, subscriptions, and under the new UI, you've got a really nice graphical map here. You would scroll all the way down until you find your project module, and you would turn this on. Once you activate it, you would then go in and do some configuration. And as I mentioned before, you're also going to need the order entry module, so you're going to want to turn this one on as well. When all that's done, typically you configure some permissions to be able to use each of the modules. And then what you will see when you come into the project module is a lot more choices and capabilities than you would for just the project dimension. So we've got in the projects much more information being captured. Let's go take a look at one. There's that first screen that we had in project dimension. We've got a second screen here for additional information, but now when we look through the rest of the system, we've got resources where we can assign employees, start and stop dates, labor rates, expense markups. We can go in and get a summary that is real time on the project. We can go in and set up billing options of how the customer is billed. We can break the project down into as many tasks as we want. And that task is also optionally reportable up to the general ledger as well using the class dimension. There is talk in the next releases in the future of breaking task out to a separate dimension completely. It's not available right now, so it piggybacks on the class dimension. And lastly, if we want to set up some custom fields, we can do that as well. Under the project module, we've also got the ability to assign resources. We generate invoices within the project module, but it runs that process and drives them into the sales order as a project invoice. If we're using time and expense, we can access time entry and approvals in the project module or over in the T&E module. Customers, employees, and items that you would use for billing can also be accessed here or over in the inventory, the time and expense, or the accounts receivable. And then we have a whole group of custom reports that are available. So you can see the project module is much more than just using the dimension. It's a full project billing system. Okay, so that's our project information. One of the nice features is that when you create a project, you have the ability to identify particular dimension qualities that it'll post to. So in this example, when this project's being created, we're recording any activity directly against professional services. We're saying that the project is being done in the Austin location, and the class is for franchises. Any data entry we do in time entry, accounts payable, or the time and expense module is going to use those dimensions as a default, so you don't have to repetitively key them in. It does some error tracking for you. You can change them if needed. Here's an example of where we have gone in and we have assigned resources. James Simpson, he's coming in at $140 an hour, some additional staff members, and this will allow you to be able to build out a full costing on a project at the task and employee level, so you have full reporting and budgeting against the project. Down here in the lower pane is our data entry screen, where we're allowing the users to go in and do entry against task. I can toggle over into our company and we can take a look at one of those. So here in our time and expenses, we have the ability to go in and enter our own time or to key in entries for additional staff members. We can add employees on the fly or pick them from a list. We can attach documents in this screen if we want. Here I have a lookup for our project, so I can go in and hit that project. Here's all the, I'll find one that's got some tasks assigned to it. All right. Well, typically we would have a task. Here's our time entry. In this particular case, the company's only set up for regular time. We indicate whether it's billable or not. It could be that we're incurring charges against the project that we want to track, could be administrative charges, and indicate if it's billable or not. And then our departments, our location, and here we can put our time in. Now, if we're using the time and expense approval process, then we have a variety of different ways that we can identify the approval. It could be immediate manager, it could be department head, or it could be a custom designation for approval. So if it's a small company, you may just designate, the administrator for the time entry. So that's what your data entry screen looks like. If you double click on it, it gives you the ability to go in and put in some additional information here. You've got an area for notes. It's 200 characters. So you could say inspection, and down here you could say inspected unit, unit 1, all circuits, that type of thing. It gives you a lot more room than the general description. And you can have them print on the job reports as well as even the billing. So there's a lot of detail that can be captured in the time entry. All right. Once you begin to accumulate information in the project module, it will display in real time. What we're looking at here is a roll-up of the financial information based on expenses. It shows us our revenue and a calculation on our gross profit. If we decide to use a budget, we get some nice budget variance information. Down in the lower portion of the screen, we have our hours, both billable and unbilled and non-billable. And then if we're interfacing to the purchase order or the accounts payable or time and expense module, we can also see a roll-up on the project expenses. These views are also available at a task level. So, comparison to the project module using full project accounting versus the one on the right, which is T&E without project accounting, also known as project dimension, just the dimension. You can see on the left-hand side, it's a full project reporting system. So we have the ability to capture timesheets against customers, items, projects, tasks. We have statistical reporting on all of our billable time and hours. We've got labor posting, approval process, billing through AP, through the timesheets, and through the purchases, approvals, and we have a host of built-in reports. If we're using the time and expense module with just the project dimension, we still have the ability to input time against a project, a customer, or an item, and these are dependent on how you configure the time and expense module. But we lose the capability of a real-time project module to capture posting and statistical information, labor costing, time and approval, and bills. So the question is, in the final analysis, why would we use project dimension versus project accounting? When I started the presentation, the first thing I pointed out was you simply have a need for one additional dimension. You can, in your production environment, you can take that project dimension. If I go over here, and if maybe we want to call it under our terminology, instead of calling it project, we want to call it, for instance, engagements. We can change the system around and make it use that dimension that meets our business needs. Now, throughout the system, it'll treat this dimension as engagements. Second reason you might want to use just the project dimension versus full project accounting is that in your environment, you are using possibly an industry-specific project accounting system outside of Intacct. For instance, in the construction business, architectural business, there is reporting and processing the data that currently Intacct cannot satisfy, particularly the architectural billing documents that are required in order for contractors to get reimbursed. And what you can do is you can capture that information in your custom project accounting system, and with the interfaces that are available from Intacct, you can bring that information in and pass that project reporting information using just the project dimension straight into the general ledger. So what you have is you have a fully functional, robust project system, possibly outside of Intacct, but you have the reporting available at the general ledger level that gives you very robust reporting on a project-by-project basis. So those are just two examples of where you might want to use the project dimension instead of the full project accounting. At this point, I am done with my presentation, and I'd like to open the floor to any questions that anyone might have.
Okay, thanks, Jim. That was really good. I'll give it a few seconds or a minute to see if anyone asks anything. And right now, you know, we don't have a set date for the July Cloudbytes, but we should be confirming that up by the end of this week, and that'll be in the next newsletter and out on our website. So give it a few more seconds here. I'm not seeing anything come in, Jim.
Okay, great.
All right, well, this was recorded, so you'll get the slides and the recording by the end of the day today. So thank you, everybody, and thanks, Jim, for doing this.
You're welcome. Bye now.
Bye.